Reverend Sir, enclosed I have sent you a parcel of papers and letters which Mr. Southcombe has sent here, by which you will see he is in the most miserable, distracted state of mind, to retrieve him from which all the endeavours of Mr. Hutton and Mr. Webb have proved ineffectual, and we therefore can think of no other person, as he will pay no sort of regard to any of his relations, that can have any weight with him but yourself. And therefore I desire that out of compassion and charity to Mr. Southcombe, you would not fail of being at the parsonage tomorrow, in order, if possible, to assist Mr. Southcombe in the recovery of his senses. I would not desire you coming to this house, as possibly you might not think it right, either in regard to your daughter or the young gentleman under your care. But at all events, it will be necessary for you to stay at the parsonage till you have finished your business. Therefore, Mr. Southcombe will not be prevailed upon to hold any conversation with you after you have been once here. Mr. Hutton is now here, and is good as to say that unless any extraordinary business calls him elsewhere, then he will stay tomorrow in order to confer with you at some convenient place in the village, and assist you in this melancholy affair. Last Saturday se'nnight, Mr. Southcombe sent his boy here with a message, intimating that if I did succeed well under inoculation, that Mr. Southcombe did indeed to be inoculated, but no consideration was taken of the poor inhabitants of the village. The beginning of the week after, we had so many earnest applications from the poor desiring to be inoculated, that I esteemed it to be almost unanimous request of the whole parish to have the operation performed on them, which I by no means could, and I thought indeed I by no means ought to discourage. The unanimity of their request will sufficiently appear to you by a paper which I will order to be laid before you tomorrow. I therefore gave orders for their being supplied with all proper kinds of necessaries, and directed Mr. Tossell to inoculate them at my expense, and this I ordered to be imparted to Mr. Southcombe, who thereupon sent word that they would send for the doctor immediately and be inoculated. But the doctor, instead of coming, wrote one of the most extraordinary letters that was ever penned, which has hurried them out of their senses. He intimated that no physician of character ever advised inoculation, nisi ambar, Flaman and Pecuniam, and that it was only practised by quacks and mountebanks, and that you, clergy, whose precodial titan had formed a better clay, had many unanswerable arguments against the practice, that even they, physicians, had not tan obtusa pectora, but that they must feel the force of several of them. And there were several reflections on Mr. Tossell crowded into that letter, from which I applied for a copy of, as you'll see by a paper herewith sent as of yesterday's date. He objects to my subscribing it, but I did not intend that paper for Mr. Southcombe's perusal, but ordered it to be sent to the clerk for him to make a fresh copy of it for Mr. Southcombe, which, it seems, my servant neglected to tell the clerk, as Mr. Southcombe had before insisted on having the original paper sent from home, though it was sent with the like directions as mentioned above to the clerk of the parish. Upon the receipt of this letter of Dr. Barber's, Mr. and Mrs. Southcombe grew immediately frantic and outrageous. They first sent to Luxton to know whether he and his family intended to be inoculated, and upon being answered in the affirmative, they sent word again that he should immediately remove out of the house which he had taken of Mr. Southcombe for a certain term. Luxton returned him for answer that he was determined to be inoculated and stay in the said house, on which 'twas reported that the walls of the house should be pulled down. On hearing of these violent procedures, and not being able to bear the thoughts of a poor man being so oppressed, I sent to Mr. Southcombe to let him know that his menace to Luxton was cruel and unjustifiable, and to beg that he would reflect on the consequence of such measures. as he had proceeded to too great lengths before in threatening to pull down the house. This somewhat checked his proceedings further with the poor man, but since that time they have been continually running from one absurdity to another, sometimes sending and scolding with those who intended to be inoculated, and at other times attempting with offers of money to divert them from pursuing such intentions. The parson's man had 2 children whom he begged to have inoculated, and desired the parson's consent, but was answered that he should be turned immediately out of the work the first moment he attempted any such thing. However, the man and his wife, being convinced of the usefulness of inoculation, has brought his children to Mr. Tossell to be inoculated, and was immediately discharged from Mr. Southcombe's employment, and his 6 taken into mine. I never yet knew an instance where such a new thing was at once so readily approved of, so unanimously desired as this operation has been by the common people. Mr. Tossell proposes to inoculate his nephew, Farmer Johnson's son, on Thursday. Mr. Webber of Collicott, whom you know, approves greatly of the scheme and says it is greatly for the advantage of the poor, and that if he was not so far advanced in years he would be inoculated himself. Mr. Fisher speaks much to the same purpose, and he is determined to be inoculated with his family soon. This, I hope, with a paper I shall send you tomorrow, will give you a just idea of the merits of the case. I am now sitting up for the 3rd day, and thank God gain strength as fast as possibly I can wish. I must again repeat my earnest desire that you would not on any account fail of being at the parsonage tomorrow. Our best services attend you and your family. I am, Reverend Sir, your most faithful, humble servant, James Buller, sent to the Reverend Mr. Dardo at Tiverton.